So, generative AI. It's everywhere, right? The hype is just massive, and it kind of feels like it can do anything. But with all this noise, how do you even begin to figure out where it actually makes sense to use it? All right, let's dive into a framework that's going to help us decide. The best way to think about this technology is as a tool, a very powerful, very flexible new hammer that everyone is excited about. And it's a fantastic tool for building all sorts of things. And that's the real question, isn't it? Having a great hammer is one thing, but if you don't know what a nail looks like, you're just kind of going to be smashing things, right? So we need to learn how to spot the right problems, the nails, for our new AI hammer. Okay, so to help us figure this out, we're going to test two totally different ideas throughout this explainer. First up, we've got a chatbot for the Harvard Kennedy School website, designed to help applicants with their questions. And on the other hand, something much more ambitious, a tool to help draft brand new policy proposals for the city of Boston. See, two very different nails. Let's see which one is the better fit. All right, our framework starts with a pretty simple question. Can we even use generative AI for this task in the first place? We're going to use this 4-part litmus test to see if a task is technically a good fit for what these models really do best. So, here they are, our 4 key criteria. Does the task need that personalized, back-and-forth interaction? Does it involve digging through a huge body of text? Does it require some creativity? And finally, can we actually show it examples of what we want? Okay, first up, personalization. Large language models are absolutely brilliant at this. Why? Because their core function is just predicting the next word based on the entire conversation so far. And that allows for this really natural, flowing dialogue that adapts to what you're saying. Think about something like custom tutoring, or maybe guiding someone through a super complex application process. Next up, number 2, corpus analysis. And this is a major strong suit for these models. Using a technique called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, you'll hear that a lot. An AI can be pointed at a massive library of documents, like an entire university's admissions website or decades of legal code, and pull out only the relevant information to answer a specific question. Seriously, it's like having a super-powered research assistant on call 24/7.
All right, our third test is creativity. And here's something that most people don't realize. You can actually control an AI's creativity. Yeah, you can dial it up or down. It's all done with a setting called temperature, which basically adjusts how predictable or how surprising its word choices are.
Let me show you what I mean. Let's see this in action. So at a temperature of 0, the AI gives you a super standard, predictable joke. Every single time. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? Because it was too tired. But then, when you crank that temperature all the way up to 1, you get way more variety, more randomness. You might get, why did the scarecrow win an award? Or why don't scientists trust atoms? It just becomes, well, more creative. So just how creative can this thing be? Well, the Wall Street Journal put this to the test in a pretty fascinating experiment. They pitted ideas from Wharton MBA students against ideas generated by GPT-4. The challenge was simple. Come up with a new product for college students that costs under $50. The results? Well, they were not even close. The results were absolutely stunning. Check this out. The average purchase probability for an idea coming from a top-tier MBA student was 40%, but the average for an idea from GPT-4? A full 47%. The AI wasn't just faster. On average, its ideas were actually seen as more commercially viable. Wild, right? And that brings us to our final test, learning by example. See, LLMs are incredible mimics. If you've got a whole bunch of examples of what a good output looks like, let's say logs of successful customer service chats, or maybe examples of really well-written policy memos, you can use them to teach the AI your desired style and format. This is done through techniques like few-shot prompting or even fine-tuning. Okay, so we've established if a task is a good technical fit. We know if we can do it. But that's only half the battle, right? Now we have to ask a much, much harder question. Just because we can, does that mean we should? And this is where we move from capability to responsibility. This brings us to those crucial real-world risks. You really have to ask yourself, what's the cost if the AI gets it wrong? Could it accidentally introduce or even amplify bias? Is our user data being handled securely? And maybe most importantly, is the AI's objective truly aligned with our actual goals? These are not technical problems. These are fundamentally human ones. And let me tell you, the stakes can be incredibly high. This isn't some theoretical risk. Late in 2023, a city in Brazil actually passed a new local law. Here's the kicker. What the city council didn't know at the time was that the entire ordinance was written word for word by ChatGPT. Yeah, the councilman who proposed it just asked the AI to write it for him, and then he presented it to his colleagues for a vote without making a single change, and without telling anyone where it came from. Now, look, regardless of the policy's merits, this is a huge red flag. It just highlights the massive risk of using these tools in high-stakes environments without any human oversight and transparency. Okay, so now we have our complete framework, the technical criteria on one side and the practical considerations on the other. Let's put it all together and reach a final verdict for our two use cases. All right, let's score them. For the HSKS admissions bot, personalization and corpus analysis are absolutely key, so it scores high on both of those. Creativity, not really needed, so that's low. Now, for the Boston policy drafter, creativity is crucial for generating new ideas, so that gets a high score. But here's the clincher, the practical risk. For the bot, the risk is pretty low. A wrong answer can be easily corrected by a human. But for the policy drafter, as we just saw with that Brazil example, the risks are incredibly high. And so our verdict is crystal clear. While AI could technically be used for both tasks, the HKS admissions bot is a much better nail for this generative AI hammer. It plays to the technology's strengths in a low-risk environment where the cost of failure is pretty minimal. The policy drafter, on the other hand, is a super high-risk task that requires a level of nuance and accountability that these systems, they just aren't ready for yet. So there you have it. That's the framework. It's a way to help you separate the real-world hype from the practical reality. It helps you see beyond just what's possible and focus on what's actually productive and responsible. You've got the tool, you know the risks, so the only question left is, what nail are you going to hit? What are you going to build?